when I needed to get stable in my life, I went back home, right? When I needed to
Mm,
get some clarity, I went back home.
mm,
When I
mm,
needed safety, I went back home, right? There's all these
mm.
times that I needed things in my life. I had to go back home to get it.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we are talking to an extremely special guest. She is one of my favorite people in the world, and she is like me from the Boogie Down Bronx, New York. So I'm so thrilled that you're going to get to meet her and hear her story, hear about the street she grew up on. But I want to let you know that today's conversation could be potentially triggering. We're talking about some really sensitive content. So know that there will be resources provided at the end of the conversation, but also just watch with care, take care of yourself, and thank you for joining us. Woo! I'm so happy to see you. So I want to jump right in because I haven't been able to talk to anybody else who's from the Bronx yet. So
Yes.
this is so exciting. So tell me what street you grew up on, exactly where you grew up in the Bronx, New York.
I'm from 167th and Anderson Avenue. It's like,
Okay.
you have to give the intersection
You
because
do.
it's not. Anderson is a long street, and 167th is a long street, but I'm from 167th and Anderson, and that's significant because I'm from the top of the steps that everybody now calls the Joker steps.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, it was so crazy to me when I started seeing people taking picture on the stairs that we dreaded growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate those stairs, but yeah, that's where I grew up.
I love a great villain origin story
Yeah,
because it reminds us that hurt people hurt people. It
yeah,
reminds us that evil comes from somewhere.
right.
So it doesn't surprise me that they would come to the Bronx, right? Because we're thought of as being the underbelly of where so much um, darkness, evil comes from. I think we are both testaments to the fact that it's also a place where a lot of goodness and light and
Exactly.
creation comes from.
Yeah.
But what was your neighborhood like? What was that intersection like for you? How did you think about it as a kid? What did that world feel like?
Well, my neighborhood was the center of the universe for me. My family is from that area. So I'm from 167th. My grandparents were from 163rd, so they were right down the street. And
Hmm.
so people call that area the Hill because it's a lot of people may not know the Bronx is a lot of hills. There's a lot of,
Mhm.
particularly on the west side, there's a lot of I remember learning about anticlines and synclines in school, and they used the Bronx as an example. And so
Yeah.
we were
I grew up
at
even on the east side. I grew up on Castle Hill, just like
Castle
Castle Hill
Hill, right?
Soundview.
Exactly. So there's
Mhm.
always.
Mhm.
I didn't know you were Castle Hill. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we were at the top of the hill, and so my neighborhood was just everything. My father was the number man in the neighborhood, and his number spot was at the top of the hill,
Mm.
and I loved it. It was a lot of community. Everything you needed was in the neighborhood, and so you didn't have to go too far for anything. You knew everybody. You knew people in the blocks over from you, and but you kind of stayed in your area, and you identified
Yeah.
everybody from where they were from. You're
Yeah.
like, is that Stephanie? Stephanie from 163rd or Stephanie from
Yeah.
166? Like,
Totally. 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 Oh my goodness. Is that Angela from Parkchester or Angela from Castle
right,
Yes, Yes,
exactly.
exactly. So what did it mean for him to be the numbers man, right? Because it feels like that in many ways he was the most important person in the community,
Oh
right?
yeah. You're like the mayor of the block, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it meant that you had resources. And so
Mm,
he was the number man, and that meant that he provided resources for the community. It also meant he was, like, I tell people all the time, my first introduction to community organizing and activism came from my father. And although my
mm,
stepfather, and although number running is an illegal gambling institution or what have you, he put those resources back into the community. He also, he was the
mm.
one who bankrolled the block party in the summertime. He was the one who rented the bus to take the kids on bus rides in the summertime to make sure we got out of the neighborhood. He was the one who, he had the wrench, so he would open the pump in the summertime to make sure we got had a little fun. And so that's what I learned. When something happened in the neighborhood, people called Mr. West. People called him and his friends, and so he was a problem solver. He was um, a mediator. He was
Mm,
just a person who cared very deeply about the people around him. He would clean up. The one video I have, a friend of mine who was into video making and stuff had a video camera when we were young. He was a couple of years older
mm.
than me. And years ago, he sent me this clip. You can't hear my father speaking on it, but it's a short video of him cleaning up. He would just go outside early on Sundays and he would take a broom and he would be sweeping up and moving the garbage around, just like he took care of the neighborhood. That's what I knew of him and others like him in the neighborhood. He was just like, we cared about our community.
It's so interesting because you really, for me, when I listen to you, it reminds me that we have traditionally, historically taken care of our neighborhoods and our communities because of the distrust with social services,
Right.
our relationships with authority figures, with the
Yeah,
police. So it's not like these neighborhoods were without control or without support or without infrastructure. It's just that we created a lot of that for
we had to
ourselves.
create it. Even if it was coming, it took so long, or
Mm,
if it was
mhm.
inadequate when it did come. And so we created those systems and infrastructures for ourselves. And so that's what I grew up knowing, that we took what we had to make what we needed.
It's funny because in my adulthood, I see that. I think when I was younger, I would see the milk crates as
Yeah,
basketball hoops, or think of a
exactly.
record player being turned into an instrument, or
Right.
spray can all over the wall, and think like those are signs of lack. That's a lack
Exactly.
of a museum, a lack of a basketball hoop, a lack of a trumpet. But we manifested our own genius. Like we
Yeah.
took those little resources and created a whole world of abundance and community
Exactly.
and art and festivity. And I'm so grateful to be from somewhere that is so rich and so resourceful. Did you have a role within your family? Like who else was in your home? Were you a leader in your family?
Well, I'm the oldest. It's myself and
Mhm.
my little brother, but I'm also the oldest cousin. And
That's
I don't.
everything. That's
Yeah.
everything.
there's
Cousins
there's
and play cousins, right?
cousins and play cousins, exactly. And so there are about, I think 14 of us, and I'm the
Wow.
oldest of the first cousins, and the oldest, and I'm a big sister. So I had that role for sure, babysitter and leader in that way. And you pass on. Well, there's the leader in that. My mother's youngest two siblings were like my older siblings in a way. So
Mm,
they're
mhm.
about
Yeah.
11 and 13 years older than me. So they operated sort of like
Okay.
my older siblings, and they taught me a lot. And so it was kind of my job to take what they taught me and teach their children, and then my other cousins.
Mm.
Some of that was about survival, right? Some of that was about how to fight, how to
Yeah. Yeah.
keep your head up and your wits about you in the streets. Um, and a lot of that was about, like being good and staying and doing well in school and studying. And a lot of that, my family was very big on education. I had a Caribbean grandfather who was very strict and very clear that we were going to be successful. And
Right.
that was drilled into us at a very, very young age. um so my role was to be a kid, but to be a successful kid. Education
Mm.
was a priority in our household, in our family, when I was young.
It was that I Yeah, I think part of that is the immigrant experience, right? I think there are
Mhm.
so many because my mother's parents both came to the US from Jamaica. So there was
Mhm.
also that just that need to
Mhm.
prove how full of excellence we are.
Yeah.
So when you talk about I want to talk about Unbound and how you so courageously share with us a lot of the trauma that you had to face as a young person, as a girl. And the idea, I was thinking about this conversation and thinking so much of that trauma happened in those early streets, and
Mhm.
how you reconcile that place. Like, how do you reconcile your feelings of that place being a place of family and warmth and love and community, and also these horrible things that you survived?
It's interesting. I really do love the Bronx. I love where I'm from. And when I think about home and I think about the Bronx, I still feel a warm feeling. I still feel a loving feeling because we can still love things and we still love people who harmed us, right?
Mm.
And we still have to, many of us have to live and work and love and worship and learn in the places where we were
Coexist.
harmed. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
We have to exist in the places where we were harmed. It's just the reality of our lives. And so I think as a matter of reality and function that I learned to extract the pieces and the parts of it that brought me joy and comfort um, from home because I have the moment of trauma and the place where the trauma happened is one thing, but I have so much more happiness
Mm.
and love that comes from that place than I do harm. Um,
Mm.
I just when I think of it, like, and a lot of that came as an adult too, right? A lot of that came from
Yeah.
reflection because I was very anxious to get away from the Bronx at one
Mm.
point in my life. I was very when I wanted to go to college away from home. I wanted to get
Yeah.
out of New York, and I'm sure you went through the same thing where it was just like
Totally.
as soon as I could get out, I wanted to get out. But
Yeah.
then when I got away and I wanted to get out, I mean, I think it's good to get out into the world. And I realized how much New York and how much the Bronx taught me. And then
Mm.
I was like, oh, I'm ready to go back, and maybe not to live in the Bronx again, but I just appreciate it so much. That's how I've been able to sort of reconcile that. There's a sense of stability. There's that resilience. There's all of these lessons that I have pulled from my upbringing and even my in adulthood. When I needed to get stable in my life, I went back home. Right? When I needed to
Mm.
get some clarity, I went back home.
Mm.
When I
Mm.
needed safety, I went back home. Right? There's all these
Mm.
times that I needed things in my life. I had to go back home to get it.
Were you able to experience how different you are from the little girl who walked those streets?
Yes, very
Yeah.
much so. I even went back to the actual
Mm.
space where I experienced harm for the first time ever.
So you went to that space with your daughter.
Yeah, when we were filming the trailer and they were like, my daughter uses they pronouns and they were like, "Are you sure, mommy?" And I said, "Yeah." I literally, even when I was a kid, I never went back there I used to avoid that space all the time. And I stood there and I don't know what I expected, but it was nothing. It was just me standing. I didn't cry. I didn't. I was just standing there staring at it, and it's funny, it's such a smaller area than I thought. I had made it
Mm.
larger than life in my brain all these years because I was
Yeah,
7, so everything looks bigger,
that's
right?
right.
It was a smaller
Yeah.
space. So walking that space, I felt powerful even because I was like, "Wow, look at how small all of this is in comparison to how big I am." Not just
Mm.
physically, how big I am as a person, how much I've grown.
Spiritually, emotionally,
Spiritually,
intellectually.
emotionally, it's right, all the ways that I've grown in 40 years,
Mm.
and the things that I've avoided that I didn't even have to avoid because I'm so much bigger than this. Yeah,
You did a lot of work
I've done a
on
lot of work.
yourself and
Yeah,
on unpacking your trauma,
yeah,
understanding the assault and your relationship to it. You did a lot of work to be able to stand in that space, and even did
absolutely.
so much work with your daughter. And
Mhm.
um, I think that was one of the parts of the book that was most moving to me because, you know, as a parent, to be a survivor. You just want to know that you can protect your kids. And I
It's
was so grateful that you had the courage to write about it, to be in that space with your daughter, that that you gave them tools to be able to share honestly with you in a way that was comfortable for them. It was really like ninja mothering. I was it really was. I was so inspired and moved and grateful that you were able to write about it. I really was.
even harder than to write about my own experience and my own assault. It was hard, and I let Kaya read right from the Kaya is the only person who read directly from the computer, right? Like,
Mm.
I because I wanted them to be comfortable, anything they had to deal with them, and I said, "Anything you are uncomfortable, I will delete it. Not even
Mm.
nobody will see my editor," and I let them read about their father, I let them read about them, and,
Mm.
my kid is great, I love them so much.
So I want to go back to that little girl in the Bronx and just ask you a little bit more about her. Like, what music did she love?
Oh, I love so my mother was a huge music person. My
Mhm.
mother had albums, a huge album collection. So, I mean, I loved hip hop, of course. When I was a kid, my mother bought me Curtis Blow's These Are the Breaks 45
Yes.
or 7 the album, the
Yeah.
single rather.
Mhm.
Um, but I also loved R&B,
Mhm.
but I loved um we liked my stepfather was also Caribbean, so I loved reggae and I loved rockers and we listened to a lot of like Bob Marley and Peter Tosh
Mm.
and,
Yeah. Yeah.
calypso and Caribbean music. I grew up with a lot of it.
Yeah. And what about food? Was it a lot of Caribbean food also?
Lots of Caribbean food because both my grandfather and my father were chefs, self-made
Mm.
chefs.
Mm.
So there was a lot of food.
And sounds, like, what do you remember? Did you have a window in your bedroom? Do you remember what it looked out on?
I had a window let me tell you about the window in my bedroom. It was very
Okay.
special because my window faced Yankee Stadium.
It did?
Yes, which sounds delightful, but on the night of games, it meant the lights of Yankee Stadium
So bright.
shined directly into my window, and you could not sleep because no matter even if the shades were down, those lights are
Didn't matter.
incredibly bright.
Did you also get, like, the fireworks? Like, you could
The
see the
fireworks,
fireworks from your
yeah,
bedroom.
yeah, yep. We lived on
Wow.
the 5th floor, so we were, kind of high enough. I mean, you could go out you could sit on the fire escape and watch too, so it
Yeah,
was kind of
yeah.
nice. That part was kind of nice.
If you could go back to that little girl and give her some piece of wisdom, like, what would you want her to
Mm.
know?
Well, I would certainly want her to know that life is good. That
Mm.
that everything that you are seeing here, everything that you hear here, all that you're soaking in is gonna make you it's gonna make you, right? It's
Mm.
gonna make you who you are. It's gonna be a part of your lifeblood and make you that much better. Um, but
Mm.
I'd also want her to know that nothing that you experience, including the worst of the things you experience, are your fault. That that healing is possible, and yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that you're a good person, that
Mm.
you're a good girl.
Mm.
Yeah, that you're a good girl.
I think
Mhm.
that's so powerful because I feel like I resist that sentiment often, that idea of good girl or good
Mhm,
boy, because I feel
mhm.
like in my life, wanting to be a good girl sort of kept me from telling people the truth and
Yeah,
kept me from asking for help because I
yeah,
just wanted to be good.
yeah,
But when I heard you say it, I realized like, "Oh, you don't have to be good. You're saying you
exactly.
just are
You just
good."
are, and our worth
Wow.
is not attached to anything else but our existence.
Mm.
And so I'm saying it in very pedestrian elementary
In
terms as a
in words
child.
that she would understand. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I'm
Mhm.
a good girl, but what I ultimately mean is that you are worthy just because you exist, not for any
Mhm.
other reason. That's what I want 7-year-old Tarana to know.
Ugh.
And I want every little girl who looks like you and me, who's walking down Simpson Street, who's walking down Castle Hill, who's waiting for the 6 train, who's waiting for the 35 bus, you know?
Yes.
I want those little girls at the bus stop, at the train stop, who's sitting in Westchester Square, who's walking down Fordham Road. I want those little girls to feel worthy.
When
Hmm.
you think about the street you grew up on, is there anything that you want to bring into your life now? Anything that you miss from that street that you wanna incorporate into your life more today?
I miss community.
Mm,
I really miss community. I miss, even when I just moved from New York to Maryland, and even in New York, I was in Harlem, and I miss that sense of community.
mm,
It's just sitting outside and knowing people,
mm.
speaking to people, looking out for people. I remember when COVID first hit and I was still in Harlem, and I had, I bought this big giant box of masks, and I left them outside. I left them downstairs with the doorman in our building, and I said, we just have too many. I just wanted to leave some for people, and they sat there for so long because people were distrusting of taking them, right? And I
Mm,
know it was COVID or what have you, and just
mhm.
people just had this. We didn't know each other. Our neighbors didn't know each other. There was a woman who lived alone, who I knew lived alone in our
Floor.
on our
Mhm.
floor. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I said, "Don't come to the door. I know it's COVID." I just was tapping on the door to make sure you had groceries and things like that. And just she was so grateful to have somebody check on her. We had never spoken to each other.
Mm,
It just I miss community.
yeah. Oh, I don't wanna be greedy with my time, so I know I have to let you go. I just have
Thank
one last
you.
question. I have
Yeah,
one
go
last
ahead.
question. So this is like our silly kind of question on the
Come
show,
on.
which is, we the sexy alter ego name. Because if we're gonna talk about the street you grew up on, people say your sexy alter ego name, right, is your first pet, is your first name, and you're the street you grew up on. So I want to know, what is your sexy alter ego name? So it's your pet and then the name. You're gonna have to pick one of those streets on the intersection.
Charlie Anderson.
That's sexy. That I'm not gonna lie. That one works. That
Charlie.
works. Wow. Okay. That was such an amazing conversation. I love that woman, Tarana. I love you so much. I'm so thrilled to be able to talk a little bit more about the street I grew up on and the street she grew up on in our beautiful hometown of the Bronx, New York. Thank you for joining us. As always, we're so grateful that you're walking these streets with us. Please tune in again. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and push that thing that lets you get alerts so that you know what's coming next. Also, let us know who you want to hear from, who you want to walk with on the street they grew up on.